So, guys, I've had plenty to say. James, I'm going to start with you. A third of the kids in our schools are having trouble when it comes to reading, yet on television tonight, the Super Bowl and Taylor Swift was more important. Let's put media to one side. This is how many fire alarms do we need before there's a serious conversation that's not just about hurling more money? Because 300 billion got us the worst results in 20 years.
Paul, this is a debate that has been going on literally for as long as I've been in Australia. I've been here for more than 2 decades, and there were fights back then about should we actually teach children to read properly with phonics and sounding out words, or do we do the cuddly sight reading thing that everybody knows doesn't work? And back then it was controversial, and the left won, and they've won for decades now, and now we are seeing the price. It was amazing to me to hear on the radio and this morning when they were talking about, number one, the Grattan Institute, which is a left-wing institute, a left-wing think tank, came out and announced these findings. Great. So have we got some bipartisanship on this? But then, finally you start to hear some experts say, oh, gosh, maybe we should do... So the problem, though, is we've lost a generation at least to this. They're functionally illiterate. They can't read. They can't be engaged citizens. They, not sound like an old guy, but they spend all their time just looking at pictures and reels on their phone. And it's, this is not a recipe for a happy, healthy, productive society, Paul.
Well, it is frightening, Bronwyn, because for obvious reasons, we always want the next mob to be smarter than we were because they'll take the joint in a better direction. But we all know that the education system very heavily laced with a lot of things that weren't about our education, which is about turning them into the good little activists who at a moment's notice turn up in the right places and vote the right way. But still, how do we fix this? And how do we actually deal with the urgency of this? Because I feel no sense of urgency when we get this data. None at all.
Well, you're quite right. It did start years and years ago, the argument between phonics, which is how I learned to read, and this whole language thing. Well, although there's a recognition and phonics has been creeping back in, you've got a legion of teachers who've been taught to teach the other way. Are they going to retrain? Good question. But I think, and I've said this before, I think what we have to do is return to having teachers' colleges. Not these wacko, worthless degrees that you get into from the university stream, but reinstate dedicated teachers' colleges where you actually learn to teach and how you learn to discipline a class, how you deal with the unruly, as well as learning how to teach. Because unless you've got calm in your classroom, then you're not going to be able to impart wisdom or learning.
This is the thing. I mean, the OECD has pointed out that discipline in Australian schools is one of the reasons why we are falling as far as we currently are. Now, again, Nicholas, it's Team Red and Team Blue are in complete unison here, which is, for goodness sake, can somebody take care of the kids? But we have done it a certain way, which is just to pump more and more cash, right? All sides have agreed to that for $300 billion, and the results are worse, okay? So at some point, we need to recognise that we've got a problem. And I've got to say that if the statistics were about, pick any other favourite topic that people like to talk about, and they were precipitously worse over 20 years, there'd be calls for a lot more action than the tumbleweeds we heard today.
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. I think this was a landmark report today. It's a call for urgent action. Jordana Hunter at the Grattan Institute has done an extraordinary piece of work here. The depth of the analysis is remarkable, and she's called it out. She's looked at the evidence and she's found, close to a third of schools are still teaching discredited methods for teaching kids the most important of skills, how to read. And so we've got to say the reading wars are over. And look, I agree with much of what James has said, but I really think we need to work past left and right or disciplining of kids and just look at what the scientific evidence tells us about how kids best learned to read. And the, whole of language approach is now discredited. We need to use phonics and direct instruction. And it was very pleasing to see that Jason Clare, the Federal Education Minister, put out a statement today saying just that, reading wars are over, and they are going to link federal funding to proven approaches which are scientifically shown to work. So they're ringing the bell on
Well,
some
no,
bad
but
Also,
practices
we
that
can't
still
pretend that
happen
discipline
in
isn't
Australian
part of it,
schools.
right? Now, we're not talking about bringing back the cane and giving the kids a few. It's just the OECD report has shown literally that we have some of the most disruptive classrooms in the world. Now, that is in part because we have a whole series of complaints set up that if a teacher turned around and said, "Oi, James, stop it," mum and dad run up and complain, and then we all know that the direct correlation between the discipline of the teacher and the behaviour of the kid has now been well and truly sort of washed away by kind of this idea that it's not my Johnny, it's not, none of that stuff.
Particularly when you're putting a very young female teacher into a school with unruly kids.
Correct.
It destroys the confidence of the teacher, so she'll not progress, she'll work to get out. So that's why I say we need to have teachers' colleges back,
But
where
you know,
they learn to actually teach.
And sorry, we do have to have a bigger talk about the Australian curriculum. And the Australian curriculum is, I'm sorry, Nicholas, an absolute vehicle for propaganda. It teaches kids I hear you sighing, but anybody out there who's got kids or grandkids knows what they teach about Australia, and they know what they teach about our history, and we know that it's not positive. This is why every Australia Day, we're the only country in the world that says, oh no, we can't have a celebration about anything because we're such a horrible country built on genocide and racism. That's what they teach. They've got these cross-curricular capabilities, in environmentalism and indigenous studies and in Asia-Pacific involvement that basically goes to undermine the curriculum and turn everything into politics. What Julia Gillard saddled this country with for over a decade has been a disaster, and we should simply go and we should buy the curriculum off the shelf for a place like Singapore and just simply run a curriculum that
If you want
works.
to go down that wormhole, we can go.
It's not
Look, we can go
wormhole,
down.
Nicholas.
We can have a big conversation about the curriculum. We can have a big conversation about discipline. But today's report was a landmark report which goes to the methodology which is being used in the classroom to teach kids how to read, saying that the whole of language approach, the sight teaching of words does not work, and the better methodology is to use phonics and direct instruction. That's what it was about the methodology. So you can riff till the night is long about all these other issues, but that's not what today's report was about.
Are you saying it's a great day of celebration because a left-leaning institution has finally caught up with the reality that phonics needs to be taught?
Fair point.
2 decades that's taken.
See, again, you try and put a political lens over everything.
All right. Now, I want to
you
jump
try to
back
put a
in.
political lens over everything, and Jordana Hunter is one of the
That's
best
because politics
education
got us
researchers
to
in the
this
country,
mess.
and this is a terrific report.
All right. Now,
It's got nothing to do with left and right or culture wars
okay, guys,
or
please.
curriculum
Now, I
or
wanna-
discipline.
Okay,